I found out my high school teacher faked her death 10 years ago. Now she's dating my dad, and the truth is terrifying. I, 30M, never thought I'd be writing this. But life has a way of throwing curveballs that make you question everything you thought you knew. It all started last Sunday at our regular family dinner, a tradition my dad insisted on keeping after Mom passed away 3 years ago. I was running late because my kid had a meltdown over wearing shoes, so my wife went ahead with our daughter. When I finally walked through the door of my childhood home, the laughter from the dining room stopped me dead in my tracks. That laugh, it was hauntingly familiar, like a ghost from my past that I couldn't quite place. Then I heard my dad's voice. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet someone special." The moment I stepped into the dining room, my world tilted sideways. Sitting next to my father was someone I never expected to see again, someone who was supposed to be dead. My high school drama teacher, the one who mysteriously vanished during my senior year, leaving behind a wrecked car at the bottom of Miller's Creek. She looked different. Her signature red hair was now a sophisticated gray, and she'd traded her bohemian teacher style for something more polished. But those eyes, those piercing green eyes that once critiqued my terrible portrayal of Romeo, were unmistakable. Our eyes met, and in that split second, I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by something else. Fear? She quickly composed herself, but I caught the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her wine glass. "Nice to meet you," she said smoothly, as if she hadn't spent 2 years teaching me Shakespeare and directing me in school plays. As if she hadn't attended my 17th birthday party because she was dating my aunt at the time. As if she hadn't been declared dead after a 3-month search that tore our small town apart. My wife, oblivious to the bomb that had just dropped, was already chatting with her about her recent move from Seattle. My daughter was showing her a crayon drawing. My dad was looking at her the way he used to look at Mom. I sat through that dinner in a daze, mechanically eating my food while my mind raced through memories. The investigation. The candlelight vigil. My aunt's breakdown. The newspaper headlines about the tragic accident. The conspiracy theories that swirled around town for years. She had a new name now, a new backstory, a completely fabricated life that she recounted with practiced ease. But beneath her confident exterior, I caught her stealing glances at me when she thought no one was looking. Silently pleading? Warning? I couldn't tell. After dinner, while everyone was distracted by dessert, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I know you have questions," she whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. "But please don't say anything. Not yet. Meet me at the old theater tomorrow at noon. I'll explain everything." I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand answers right there. Why did she fake her death? Why did she let everyone suffer? Why is she back now, worming her way into my family again? But my daughter's laughter from the other room held me back. This wasn't just about me anymore. Whatever bombshell she was about to drop would affect everyone I loved. "Tomorrow," I agreed, my voice barely a whisper. "But if you disappear again..." She shook her head. "I won't. I can't. There's too much at stake now." I watched her walk back to the dining room, taking her place beside my dad, playing the role of charming new girlfriend to perfection. After all, she always was an excellent actress. I just never thought her biggest performance would be played out in my own family's living room. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, was I the only one who knew? And more importantly, what could have been so terrible that it made her choose to destroy her entire life and start over? Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. But as I would soon learn, some answers come at a price that nobody is prepared to pay. I barely slept that night. By morning, I convinced myself a dozen times that I was imagining things, that grief over Mom's death had finally cracked me. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that familiar tremor in her hand, that flash of recognition in her eyes. I told my wife I had some work to catch up on at the office. I hated lying to her. But how do you even begin to explain something like this? The old theater was exactly as I remembered it. A crumbling brick building with faded movie posters from the 90s still clinging to the walls. It had been abandoned since my senior year, right around the time of the accident. She was already there, sitting on the steps, looking smaller somehow in the daylight. No makeup, no sophisticated outfit, just jeans and a sweater that made her look more like the teacher I remembered. "You came," she said, standing up. She had a manila envelope clutched to her chest like a shield. "Start talking," I said, staying at the bottom of the steps. "And don't leave anything out." She took a deep breath. "It started with a student. Not from our school, from before, when I taught in Chicago. He was troubled, brilliant, but dangerous. He became obsessed. When I rejected him, he started stalking me. Then the threats began, not just against me, but against anyone I was close to." She pulled photographs from the envelope with shaking hands. Police reports, restraining orders, news clippings about suspicious accidents involving people she knew. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without proof. He was careful. Smart. Then my girlfriend at the time, your aunt, had that mysterious car accident. The brake lines were cut, but nothing could be proven. That's when I knew I had to disappear. My aunt's accident. I remembered it clearly. She was lucky to survive. We all thought it was just that, an accident. Why didn't you tell anyone? We could have helped. She laughed bitterly. How? He had money, connections. The police were useless. The only way to keep everyone safe was to convince him I was dead. The Marshal Service helped set it up. New identity, new life. I've been living in witness protection ever since. And now? Why risk coming back? Her face darkened. Because last month, they found him dead in his apartment. Apparent suicide. The case is closed. I'm finally free. She paused, twisting her hands together. I never planned to come back here. But then I ran into your dad at a conference in Seattle. He didn't recognize me with the gray hair and different name. We started talking and you decided to just insert yourself back into our lives? Into his life. My voice rose. Do you have any idea what your death did to people here? To my aunt? She blamed herself for years. I know, she whispered. God, I know. I've played that decision over in my head every day for 10 years. But what was I supposed to do? Watch everyone I cared about get hurt because of me? I wanted to stay angry, but the raw pain in her voice was familiar. It was the same pain I heard in my dad's voice for months after Mom died. Does witness protection know you're here? She nodded. They cleared me to resume my old identity if I want to. Everything's documented. She pulled out more papers, official-looking documents with government seals. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I care about your father. And I needed you to understand why I did what I did. I sat down heavily on the steps. My aunt deserves to know the truth. I know. I'm going to tell her. I'm going to tell everyone. I needed to explain to you first. Because of all people, you knew me best back then. You were in every play, every production. You'd know if I was lying. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was my drama teacher, the woman who taught me everything about performing, asking me to verify her most important performance yet. But as I looked through the evidence in that manila envelope, another thought hit me. Wait, if you're officially cleared to reclaim your identity. I looked up at her. That means there's a paper trail now. Anyone could find it. The color drained from her face. What do you mean? I mean, if he had connections like you said, what if? I couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too horrifying. She grabbed the envelope from my hands, papers spilling onto the steps. No, she whispered. No, they said it was over. They promised me it was over. That's when we heard it, the crunch of gravel in the parking lot behind the theater. Someone was coming. My first instinct was to run, but she grabbed my arm. The back door, she whispered. It used to stick, but never actually locked. Some things never change. We used to use that same door to sneak in and practice lines after hours. We slipped inside just as footsteps rounded the corner. The theater was dark, dusty, and exactly as we'd left it a decade ago. Even the props from our last production, the glass menagerie, were still scattered around, covered in cobwebs. Through the crack in the stage door, we saw a flashlight beam sweep across the front steps where we'd been sitting moments ago. I held my breath as the beam caught the scattered papers we'd dropped in our hurry. Just kids messing around, a gruff voice called out. Place is always attracting troublemakers. Security guard. We both let out the breaths we'd been holding. But she didn't relax. We need to get those papers, she whispered. Now. As soon as the flashlight beam disappeared, we crept back outside. But as we gathered the scattered documents, a photo slipped from the pile, one I hadn't noticed before. It showed her, standing with my aunt, but there was someone in the background. A man, partially hidden, watching them. He was there, she said, her voice shaking. All that time, he was right there, and we never noticed. That's when it hit me. The real reason she came back wasn't just about my dad or being free. She was trying to make things right, to fix what she broke. But she was also scared. Not of the past, but of something else. You think he had help? I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded slowly. The suicide was too neat. Too convenient. And now, she gestured at the papers. All this information becoming available, right when I happened to reconnect with your father. It feels staged. Like someone wanting you to come back. I finished. To draw you out. The sound of another car pulling up made us both freeze. But this time, when I peeked around the corner, I recognized the car. It was my aunt's. She stepped out, looking exactly like she had at Sunday dinner. Except now her face was set in a way I'd never seen before. She walked directly toward our hiding spot, and I realized she'd known. Somehow, she'd known all along. 10 years, my aunt said, her voice carrying in the empty parking lot. 10 years I've been watching, waiting for someone to slip up. When you showed up at dinner, I almost couldn't believe it. But then I saw how you looked at her dash, she nodded at me. and I knew it was finally happening. You knew? Her former girlfriend asked, stepping out from behind me. All this time. Not at first, my aunt admitted. But after the accident, things didn't add up. I started digging. Found things. People who'd helped you disappear. I couldn't tell anyone. It would have put you in danger. So I watched. And I waited. The student, I said, understanding dawning. You found him. My aunt's face hardened. Found him. Tracked him. Made sure he could never hurt anyone again. The implications of what she was saying hit us both at the same time. The convenient suicide. The timing of everything. You, her former girlfriend started, but couldn't finish. I protected you, my aunt said simply. Like you tried to protect me, but I did it better. She pulled out her phone, showed us an email. His network is gone. Everything's been dismantled. You're actually free now. Really free. I looked between them, my drama teacher who faked her death to protect everyone she loved, and my aunt who spent 10 years systematically destroying the threat that forced her to do it. So what happens now? I asked. My aunt smiled, but it was sad. Now you have a choice, she said to her former girlfriend. You can keep your new life, your new name. Dad doesn't need to know. Or I can tell the truth, she finished. All of it. I thought about my dad, about how happy he'd looked at dinner, about my aunt, carrying this secret for so long, about the woman who'd taught me that sometimes the most powerful scenes are the ones where nothing is said at all. Maybe, I said slowly, the truth doesn't have to come all at once. Maybe it can be like a play scene by scene, when the audience is ready for it. They both looked at me, my former teacher and my aunt, and I saw something like hope in their eyes. 3 months have passed since that day at the theater. My dad knows some of the truth now, not everything, but enough. He knows that she used to live here, that she left because of a stalker, that she had to change her identity. The rest will come with time. My aunt comes to Sunday dinners again. Sometimes I catch them, my aunt and her former girlfriend, sharing looks that hold entire conversations. There's pain there, and regret, but also forgiveness. They're healing, scene by scene. As for me, I've learned that sometimes the most incredible stories aren't the ones we make up, but the ones we live through. The ones that teach us that love, whether it's romantic love, family love, or just the love of someone who wants to protect you, can make people do extraordinary, terrible, wonderful things. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get a second act,